California's gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell. Get ready for a seafaring adventure because we are getting ready to leave land and visit 4 California islands. These islands are beautiful, they're historic, they're tropical, and I guarantee you right now, you think we're going to the Channel Islands, maybe even to Catalina Island, but we're not. We're going to 4 islands that I guarantee you've never been to before. And these islands, all 4 of them, are very much a part of California's gold. Okay, our California island adventure begins. And our tour guide, we're going right to the top. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Huell, my name's Frank Coleman. I'm general manager for Thumbs here in Long Beach.
Now, you heard my introduction. You know why we're here. We want to visit 4 tropical, beautiful, historic California islands. And standing here, looking out, that looks like one to me over there. There's another one down there. There are 2 more down here. We're surrounded with islands, but these are not your traditional California islands. Give us the history of what these islands are all about, and well, where are we right now?
We're standing in Long Beach, California, and Long Beach has a long and storied tradition that centers around oil. Oil was discovered here in 1932, and we happen to be sitting on right now one of the largest oil reservoirs in all of North America, among the top 5 largest, called the Wilmington Field. Oil was discovered back in the 30s again in the onshore portion where oil derricks quickly sprang up.
I've seen those, well, everybody's familiar with those pictures, those postcards of oil derricks lining as far as you could see the beaches and the coastal areas right down here in Long Beach.
Well, there was a concern in those days from the residents about extending that kind of development offshore and creating blight and whatnot within the harbor. And so there was actually a vote that prohibited development of offshore drilling in this harbor to keep it pristine. It wasn't until in the 1950s that in the early 60s, that a vote took place that enabled development to take place here under very strict circumstances. And that is, in general, that the islands needed to be built in a way that would enhance rather than take away from the natural beauty of the harbor itself.
So these are not natural islands, these are man-made islands, and they're not really islands, they're producing oil right now. These are active oil producing islands.
That's exactly right. Each of the islands has anywhere from 200 to 300 wells, and what basically happens is that oil is being produced from those reservoirs that comes into the island. It consists of water, oil, and gas. The water, oil, and gas are separated on the islands. The water is re-injected back into the reservoir, and then the oil and natural gas are shipped ashore via some subsea pipelines.
See, I think that's the beauty of what we're looking at right here, because when you stand here and look out here, you don't have any idea what's going on out here on this island or this island off in the distance. That's what makes this so special, is that the people of Long Beach said, if you're gonna drill offshore, you better follow strict environmental rules, and you also need to hide those things so nobody knows that those are oil islands out there.
That's absolutely right, Hugh. And the island is absolutely unique and innovative. There are no other islands of this design anywhere in the world.
Okay, we're going out to sea. Well, actually, Frank, we're not really going that far out to sea. How far out are these islands from the shore?
From the shore, the closest island is about a half a mile, and the furthest island's about a mile and a half.
There are 4 islands.
4 islands.
And they're man-made, so they were, these amazing pictures we've seen of the way they were built out of nothing.
They were man-made out of dredged sand that comes from the harbor bottom and perimeter rock that was mined from quarries over in Kettling Island. We bring those quarry rocks were brought over in the 60s. They formed kind of a donut on the base of the harbor floor, and as those penetrated the surface of the water, the sand was dredged into the middle of those to form the island.
How did you decide where to place the island?
There was a large engineering study done back in the 1960s that tried to position the islands in the best place to be able to drill wells and access the reservoir that needed to be depleted.
So this isn't haphazard. They were put there in that exact spot for a reason.
There was a lot of smart engineers back in those days that worked on where to position those.
Okay, we're coming up close to our first island, and Kara, you're an expert on this. You've written books about it. You live here in Long Beach. This tropical island reflects perfectly what the good citizens of Long Beach were thinking back in the 50s and 60s, doesn't it?
You're right, absolutely right, Huell. What happened was that the city wanted to go through a city beautification movement, and the citizens really had a concerted effort to absolutely do that. And by making sure that they could bring back the coastline, because this was one and the most important natural asset to the city. And so you can see by just the tropical feel, by the architecture, by the sculptures, the landscape architects really made an effort to make sure that it could look like a fantastic island, but at the same time was an economic benefit to the city.
Actually, the citizens were probably reacting against all those years and all those postcards that had been sent from Long Beach showing miles and miles and miles of oil derricks all up and down the beach.
You're absolutely right again, because the citizens, they were very smart and they didn't want to be, as we could say, burned again. And so at the same time, they knew that the city would benefit tremendously with the libraries, with the schools, also with this whole beautification movement. And in 1961, the city actually was given the award of America's Beauty Queen as one of the most beautiful cities in the United States with regard to the greening of the landscape.
And this fit in perfectly.
And this fit in perfect when it was realized in 1966.
Along with condos.
Absolutely, condos that you don't live in, yes, and how the landscape architects really mirrored the Ocean Boulevard coastline in Long Beach, and there are several high-rises on Ocean Boulevard, one in particular, the Galaxy Tower, that you can definitely see a direct relationship.
So these were meant to look like the condos.
Yes, this urban feel on an island, and also again to mask what was happening underneath. It was almost like an aesthetic mitigation.
You know, when you look, now look in there, you can, when you look inside the island, you can begin to see some tanks and some equipment, but otherwise it's totally shielded by all of this greenery out here.
Yes, the greenery, the tropical landscaping, the condos, and also the architectural forms and sculptures that were created on the periphery of the island.
We have a boatload of experts with us today. Kurt is an expert on the landscape architect the oil companies hired to do all of this work. Tell us about this fellow. What was his name, Kurt?
Huell, his name was Joseph H. Linish, and Joe was a Southern California native, born in the Los Angeles area, lived and worked most of his life in Long Beach and Culver City.
Now, why did they choose him?
They chose Joe because he had a lot of experience both with themed designs, theme park designs, but then also, just before these islands, he had helped landscape a number of oil installations in Los Angeles.
Ah, so this wasn't a new idea to landscape oil drilling equipment. The idea was the whole island being
That's
landscape.
right. He actually started out landscaping, mitigating these installations on land, and then this was the first time that they'd attempted to do this in a serious way on an island that was human-made.
We have a picture of one of his installations in Beverly Hills, another one in
Venice Beach.
Venice Beach.
Yes.
and they didn't look anything like oil derricks, so he came well qualified to this position, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And I should note as well, Huell, that he, as he always did, he brought together a team of people that helped him. So he had the advice for the plantings of Morgan Evans, who was really the mastermind behind the Disney work, Disneyland, and also Herb Goldman, who's the sculptor who came up with these wonderful forms.
I was going to say, look over here, waterfalls, and that's a beautiful waterfall as well. So that was very carefully planned and designed.
Absolutely there. We do have drawings that Herb created for the forms, and he very carefully came up with the screen to be able to cut the noise and also keep people from seeing behind.
So wait a minute, you say the screens, that's what these concrete objects are?
Absolutely. Those are what they were, basically chicken wire with support that they would have sprayed gunite on. So they're concrete outside.
They're beautiful forms, but they're there for a reason, to protect the people on shore from hearing the sounds of the oil drilling.
Absolutely. And the added value that Herb brought to this as an artist was, as Kara has pointed out, the interpretation of these forms reflects the urban landscape that you see across the way.
Boy, this is absolutely spectacular right here. The interaction between the water and the rocks and the concrete forms and the waterfalls and the palm trees. And I guess for better or worse, you just call that the condo structure over there.
That's right. Now, what you should know is that those towers were designed before Herb came on board initially, and so he worked with the city to slightly modify them.
But people, I understand, visitors to Long Beach thought they could stay out here.
I understand that. They get the Thumbs Company apparently gets phone calls every once in a while asking if they're for rent.
Well, it makes a heck of a presentation, doesn't it? I would imagine that this is considered a work of art by other landscape architects, isn't it?
Well, I would say, let's just mention that Joe, as a trained landscape architect, brought in over 300 palm trees, planted these islands with a huge variety of flora and fauna from as far away as Australia and California. So they are very carefully crafted environments, landscaped environments.
This wasn't just haphazard. Look at this over here. This is spectacular here, and this was all planned out meticulously, nothing by chance.
No, and in fact, we have photographs that show Joe overseeing the preparation of the soil, Huell, to actually allow this stuff to grow. Because one of the things he did was, instead of barging the earth in, they pumped it from the ocean floor. So what he had to do, sir, was actually have pools of standing water where the impurities would leach up, and then he added wood shavings and other things to the soil to prepare it so the plants could grow.
Make it plant friendly.
Absolutely.
Boy, this is something right here, coming right by it. Now, there used to be more of these on each island.
I think, Huell, I looked at the original photos, there were at least 4 drills, 4 wells, so 4 towers on most of the islands. I understand that as time has gone by, they don't drill as much, so they've been able to remove them. Also, you should know that the towers are movable.
What do you mean they're movable?
Well, you need to ask the Thumbs folks, but the towers can be shifted. They're on
to where they need to do the drilling.
Absolutely.
Does anybody, I've never heard of this architect, this landscape architect before. His name again?
Joseph Linish. He was well known within his own time doing landscape themed sort of park landscape designs, and we're fortunate enough at the University of California, Santa Barbara at the Art Museum to have his archives, and so the archives tells a great deal about this wonderful project through his drawings and the photographs, and that's how we're able to talk about these now.
Very few people know his name, but they should, because he had a major influence on what the coastline of California looks like today.
This was one of Joe's proudest projects. He really felt that he was helping to contribute to making Long Beach into what he called the Riviera of the West.
And there it is, right there, the Riviera of the West. One of the 4 islands out here in the Long Beach Harbor. Now, Frank, all of these islands have names. That island off in the distance
That's Island Chaffee.
And we're headed right up here toward
Island Freeman.
And there's a wonderful story about the names of these 4 islands.
That's right. Back in 1965, when the islands were originally built, they were named islands A, B, C, and D.
That's not very exciting.
It's not very exciting. So in 1967, the City Council of the City of Long Beach decided to rename them, and they did so in honor of the first 4 astronauts to perish in the U.S. space program. So Grissom, White, Chaffee, and Freeman were their new names.
Wow, what a wonderful tribute to them, and it sure sounds better than A, B, C, and D.
Absolutely. And you might notice on these 2 islands, Chaffee and Freeman, there's not nearly the same amount of attention paid to the facade and the aesthetic beauty as there was in the first 2 islands. And the reason for that is that the first 2 islands, Grissom and White, are nearest to shore, and they're the ones that the residents of the city of Long Beach see most frequently.
The only people who really see these are boaters.
Boaters and tankers and cargo ships.
Well, I got to tell you, though, you kind of set me up for this and said it wasn't going to be as beautiful, but this island is beautiful in its own way. It's very lush and very green.
They're all beautiful. It's just all relative. We spent a lot of time on upkeep and landscape here. You might notice that there's nearly 1,000 tropical palm trees here, and there's an awful lot of attention that goes into keeping the islands beautiful and keeping them looking good.
Do you have a full-time person who does nothing but manicure these islands?
It's more than a person. We have a full-time landscaping crew that keeps track of the islands.
And now that's what one of the derricks would look like if it weren't covered, right?
That's exactly right. That's a drilling rig without the facade over the top of it.
So that's what the condo structure covers on the islands we've just visited.
That's exactly right. That's what it conceals.
And now you understand why they wanted it covered up. I mean, I know it looks beautiful to you. You're an oil man. But it looks a little bit better when it's covered up, doesn't it?
I'm sure most people feel that way.
I love the juxtaposition between the palm trees and the raw oil derricks out there. It's about as tropical and industrial as you can get.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what the landscape architects really tried to achieve. And again, making it as economically feasible to do an island like this, but at the same time to make it as beautiful as possible, so then you can see this, again, what the perfect word, juxtaposition, or almost a symbiotic relationship between hard industrial steel and nature.
Yeah, but I don't know whether it would have looked as nice if those derricks hadn't been covered. Although in a way they kind of have their own beauty standing there amongst the palm trees.
Right, and again, the landscape architects never wanted to completely mask or make it something that it wasn't. It had to be representative of its function, which was drilling for oil.
Yeah, so you can only hide that so much.
You can only hide that so much, and they weren't trying to make it a mystery. The city knew, the community knew, and that was very important to the landscape architects. Again, making it a contemporary statement on the current times.
Now, as we come up to White Island, this looks like a barge with cars on it.
That is a barge with cars on it. We have barges that service all the islands during the day. Whenever we have work that needs to be done out here, we'll bring the trucks out to the islands on the barges, allow those trucks to drive off, do their work, and then return, and back they go to the shore.
Now we're just pulling right in to White Island. So there's a little pier right here, a little dock right here.
Every island has what's called a finger designed into it, and the finger is where the crew boats come in and land and people depart, and it's also where the
Look over here.
Where the barges come in and anchor.
So there's a lot of activity out here.
There is a lot of activity. We have probably on this island right now, probably about 40 or 50 people that are working. And it can get to be much, much more active than that, depending upon the drilling operation or the level of work, well work activity.
Can we stand up now?
We can now, yes.
Okay, because I'm following all the safety rules. We got our whole crowd over here. We're all going to go on the island. Come on, let's go.
Yay.
This is fun. We're hitting dry land, and look right over here. Boy, you get a great shot of the condo up there. Ha! Welcome to White Island. We're on the tropical island on White Island, and it looks tropical on the outside, but boy, when you get on this island and look what's on the inside, There's no doubt about it. This is an operating, functional oil island.
Absolutely it is, Huell. It's right now we have an awful lot of work going on. We have drilling that's taking place, well work that's taking place, maintenance. We have probably 50 or 60 employees out here working right now.
And this is owned and operated by a group called Thumbs. And I have no idea what that means, but I have a feeling it's significant.
Now, the where Thumbs came from is an acronym for the original companies that formed the consortium and got the winning bid to construct and operate out here. And that stands for Texaco, Huell, formerly the predecessor to Exxon, Union, Mobil, and Shell, THUMS. And those companies currently have no ownership at all, but the current owner, Occidental Petroleum, elected to keep the name Thumbs because it has such positive name recognition here in the city of Long Beach.
In the community. So everybody here in Long Beach knows when you say Thumbs, they know what you're talking about.
That's right, Huell.
And Kurt told me earlier he thinks this thing can move.
And it can move, and that's the way that it was designed. You can see that there are railroad tracks that parallel the well cellars, so that the rig is able to move along these railroad tracks and position itself over any well that it wants to, so that it can do work.
Wait a minute, these are all wells down here?
Those are all wells. Each one of those represents a separate well. Some are producing wells in that they pump fluids up from the reservoir, and some of those wells are injectors.
How many wells are there on this?
On each island there's anywhere from 200 to 300 wells. And these are drilled about anywhere from a half a mile to a mile
down
under the surface, and they're drilled directionally so that they fan out almost like the legs of a spider.
So this would swing down here and hook into one of these wells, and the derrick would start working.
That's right. It would position itself precisely right over the top of one of these holes. It would drill a well that may be a mile deep. It would set casing on the outside to preserve it, and then it would begin producing oil from that reservoir.
Are y'all listening to all this? This is oil drilling 101 we're getting right here.
Yeah, but this is the nuts and bolts of what these islands are. There's the landscaping that's going on, but this is what they were built for, and this is what Joe Linish was respecting, recognizing, and trying to work with.
Yeah.
As many wells as palm trees, correct?
Right.
As Kurt said.
Yeah, he said about up to 300 wells, and there are about 330 palm trees on each of the islands. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio.
And this gives us the opportunity to see these things up close. Do they have a name? What do you call these things?
They are just concrete sculptural forms that were designed to provide a screen from the outside for the oil island.
Well, the sound.
And the sound as well.
These are the sound screens.
That's right.
And they're screening out all the noise. Here we got some going right here.
Going, absolutely. And this is great because this is the view from the back, so you see the supports.
Wow. Boy, what was he thinking? Was this just supposed to be modern, or?
Oh, it was contemporary for the time, and as Kurt mentioned, the sculptural quality maybe could even reflect the water and the waves and the ocean, and you know, kind of bringing it back to the water and the notion of, you know, that asset as being one of Long Beach's most important resources.
Boy, this says it all right here. Look at this. This industrial oil situation right over here, right up next to these beautiful modern structures that were built to camouflage all this and to soften the sound. Boy, this, if a picture is worth a million words, this one says it all right here. The oil on one side and these beautiful structures on the other. Now it gets interesting. We are following this little pathway here. It winds around. There's the ocean straight ahead of us. And look what we have come upon here. The waterfall. This is like something you would see in a park.
Yes, in a theme park. It's certainly Disneyland, Magic Mountain, that kind of thing with the waterfall. It's absolutely like that. There is a theme park element to it. But look at how there's also a lot of thought that's put into the different materials. You've got the concrete, but then the background for the water is a very beautiful textured surface. So there was thought and attention put into the composition.
Why would he go to that much thought about what kind of back was going to be behind the waterfall? Nobody out here.
Well, probably because the reality is Herb and Joe were both, Herb was a sculptor and Joe was a designer, so designing the whole thing meant thinking through to the end. So they really thought through. They didn't just leave it as something that wasn't finished. This was the complete design.
All right, now we've found some fellas who've been working out here for how many years?
I've been here 8 years.
And what's it like working out here day to day?
Well, it's something different every day.
Do people in Long Beach, when you tell them where you work, do they know what you're talking about?
Not really. When I mention I work on the Thumbs Islands, they say, we look over there and we see just a big condominium sitting there. Yeah, but they do not know it's a drilling rig.
So you have to explain it all
I have to explain it to them.
And does it make you kind of a celebrity that you're working out here? Nobody else gets out here.
They don't understand what's going on out here.
Yeah.
So,
well, nobody's ever seen this place.
That's right.
Is it different working on an island like this every day?
Well, you take a boat ride in, you take a boat ride back. It's a little bit different.
When you come out here, do you feel like you're getting away from all your problems on shore?
Not really.
You got to go home at night, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Give us a wave, fellas. They're hard-working oil guys out here on the island, on White Island, doing their job day in and day out. Well, we've had an absolutely wonderful day out here. This visit to these islands, which even people in Long Beach have never been to because it is not easily accessible to the public. We do not encourage the public just to come out here. It's a very special occasion to be able to set foot on these islands because these are working islands. But we have had an absolutely wonderful day. I think the original landscape architect, his name again?
Joseph Linish.
Would be very proud, wouldn't he?
I think he would,
of
yes.
the way it's turned out?
Absolutely.
Well, we're proud too. The name of the islands are?
Island Grissom, Island White, Island Chaffee, and Island Freeman.
Named after our American astronauts, these 4 islands out here in the Long Beach Harbor, man-made islands, oil islands, that are very much a part of California's gold. What an adventure, and how much fun! And if you'd like to go on this oil island adventure again, share it with family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library. It's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.